Hi everybody, my name's Julia from Bobbins and Buttons, and today I'm going to do a tutorial to show you how to mark and apply the bound pocket for my David raincoat pattern. So the first thing that I want to mention about the David raincoat is it's designed to be made in laminated or coated fabric or other waterproof fabric. So some of the usual techniques that we use in dressmaking don't really work on this type of fabric. We can't really use pins or tacking. So at this point I just want to mention that my friend Louise from So Sophia has written a really great blog post with lots of tips and techniques for how to work with this fabric. So that's published on my blog, and I'll add a link below this video so that you can refer to that. So what I'm going to do to start with is mark the pocket position. You'll need a couple of tools. You'll need a ruler with a right angle. I quite like to use this Pattern Master, which is designed really for making patterns, but any ruler with a right angle will be fine. And you'll also need some chalk. So again, you can either use tailor chalk or one of these rotary chalks, whatever you've got really. So what I've done to start with is pierce the paper pattern, and where the hole is I've just marked through with chalk so that I've got the top of the pocket position marked here. And now I'm going to take the ruler and just lay the right angle line against the centre front and line that up with the two chalk marks for the top of the pocket. And now I'm just going to really carefully draw in a line that joins those two marks up. So I'll just draw a little line here to show you where the end of the pocket is. So now when my pocket's prepared, I can lie that against this chalk line. So I'm going to prepare the pocket now, ready to stitch in place. So this pocket is the bound edge pocket. So I'm going to start by cutting a piece of binding that's a little bit longer than the edge of the pocket, because there will be some take up around the curves. So it's better to be a bit generous and have a bit of overhang that you can cut off afterwards. So like I said, you can't really use pins on laminated and coated fabric, but I like to use these wonder clips which just clip the two pieces of fabric together. The bias binding, you'll notice, has got two folded edges, and you'll also notice that the binding has a little bit of movement. It's almost stretchy because it's cut on the bias. But that's just something we've got to consider in a minute when we're going around the corners. So before I start clipping the binding to the edge of the pocket, I'm just going to take the pocket and fold it in half, because this is an opportunity, if your shape isn't accurate, just to trim that up to make a nice accurate shape, because it'll be a lot nicer when you've applied your pocket if it's nice and even. And that's looking pretty good, so I'm happy to go ahead and start to apply the binding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unfold one edge and just allow a little bit above the edge of the pocket so we can trim that in line with it nice and neatly at the end. And I'm just going to match the raw edges, the raw edge of the binding to the raw edge of the pocket, and start to clip around. But when I mentioned the ease of the binding, I like to let this relax as much as possible, especially around the pocket, because you'll find if it's tight, if you're pulling this quite tightly, it will start to distort the edge when you turn it in. So if you can keep that as relaxed as possible without actually creating any gathers, then you'll have a much nicer curved finish. So I'm just going to carry on clipping that around, letting that relax. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to the machine and just stitch into that crease, keeping these edges matched all the way around, and I'll come back and show you how that looks in a minute. So there we go, I've stitched that within the crease line. So the next thing to do is to bring the other folded edge over to meet the stitch line that you've just done, and then just clip that in place. So I'm just going to clip round. You can actually press this in some cases, it depends on what fabric you're using, but I just recommend if you are going to press it, just try it on a piece of scrap first, just to check before you do it on the actual real thing. And this is where, if your binding is nice and relaxed, you'll find that the pocket curves are quite easy to fold in, but if it's gone a bit tight at that stage, you'll find it's distorting and making the binding thinner. So I'm just going to carry on clipping around that edge, and now I'm going to stitch on this very edge around the pocket. So that edge is now all stitched down, so I'm ready to do the top edge now. So I'm going to just trim off the binding in line with the pocket edge, and then cut another piece of binding a little bit longer for the upper edge. So I'm going to use exactly the same method and clip this to the raw edge. Oops. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and just stitch that, and then I'll come back and show you how that looks. So I've stitched that, and I've just trimmed the ends so they're about 1.5 away from the edge of the pocket. So now all I'm going to do is exactly as I did on the other edge, but I'm going to bring in the raw edge first and then fold down the top so that you get a neat corner here. And the same with that end. And now, as when you're on the machine, it's a little bit easier just to make sure that corner's tucked in. You can tuck it in with a pin as you go and just reverse at either end to make that nice strong finish. And then we're ready to apply that to the actual coat. So there we have the pocket nice and neatly finished and ready to apply to the coat. So I'm going to bring in the coat panel again, and I'm just going to trim these ends. And now I'm going to line up the position with the top of the chalk line. And this, again, we can't use pins because of piercing the fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use masking tape to stick this down. So I'm going to place masking tape across the top, even though we're not sewing the top, just to hold it in place. And we know that's the position because we've got the chalk line there. And then I'm going to carry on and put tape around the whole of the pocket so it's nice and secure. And now, before you start sewing anything, I would just take your other front panel and just check the measurements. So just check that you've got the same measurements on both front pieces, and that way you know that you've got a nice symmetrical pair of pockets. So I'll just show you using inches here so you can see what I'm doing. So this is 2 inches from the top of the pocket to the front edge. So if your other front is exactly the same, then that's you know that they're equal. But just check on the side, that's 2 inches from the side, and then we've got 2 1/4 inches from the bottom. And you can check the base as well if you want to, just to make sure, and put them side by side, just check that they look equal. And now we're ready to sew. So we're just going to sew from the top around the curve on the very edge. But as you get to the masking tape, treat it like a pin and just pull it away. You don't really want to sew over the masking tape. So I'm just going to leave it there until I get close to it, pull it away and carry on all the way up to the other edge. And do some good back stitching at the top and bottom a few times, because with pockets they're going to get a lot of use and a lot of tension on that bit of stitching as the kids put their hands in their pockets. So just to reinforce those areas really well. So I'll bring that back in a second and show you how that looks. So there we go, nicely finished pocket. You can pull these pieces of tape away and you're ready to continue finishing your coat. So I hope you found that tutorial useful. If you've got any other questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more tutorials, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.